I'm a bit of a technique junkie. I love them all. John McKnight, Robert Putnam, then all the business guys, Peter Senge, Margaret Wheatley. I love technique. I love the way you kind of think it through and kind of these wonderful processes. One of the things that I kind of forgot, or I took very much for granted, is that for any of them to work in our context as professional community developers, is that you have to have a sense of community in order for them to work. And I wonder sometimes, we're working so hard at the work, and yet the very foundation or the very, like water is to fish, community is to what we do. And if there is no sense of community, how do we build caring communities? How do we build healthy communities? How do we get people to care for each other? How do we get people to care, period? I'm fond of this saying, fear not a community that has no leader, fear one that needs one. It is also my belief that it is our time. As community developers, it is our time like it has never been before. Our communities, our country, our world needs us more now than it has ever needed us. And we are being called upon to rise to this challenge. I find it so interesting in America that we've elected a community developer as the most powerful human being in the world. And that community developer used community development principles to get elected. Did what our organizations all should be doing, creating that kind of grassroots constituency, being able to listen as intently and as intensely, mobilizing at the grassroots. We have an opportunity. We have an opportunity like we've never had before, and we don't want to lose it. We can mobilize our communities like we've never been able to mobilize them for. We have answers that people are looking for. The difference between leaders and leadership. The difference between there being a common desire for some sort of focus or change versus that causes a collaborative action across sectors. I think that's what always fascinates me. Can social innovation occur where you are? Can you be part of entering something that will cause that system to change? What do we do to make our communities better places today? So I know there's probably lots of options. I've chosen 3. The first one is that we just work longer and harder. Okay? That's the solution. We keep doing exactly what we're doing. We keep working exactly the way we're working, but we just work harder and longer and faster, and that's going to bring about change. What do you think? You there with me? Yeah, right.
We already got that t-shirt.
Okay, you already got that t-shirt. I don't think it's going to work. I certainly can't work harder than I am, and when I look at what's happening in this country, I don't think that our sector can work harder than we are. Matter of fact, I don't think that we even need to be smarter than we are. I think we've got lots. Matter of fact, I think that we're performing at the highest level that in my working history, my career, my 25-year career, we are working at the most optimal pace, and we're the smartest that we've ever been about this work. And yet everywhere I go in this country, I get this frustration with the stagnation of how things are. We can't seem to take ourselves to that next level. Small changes, small wins. We so desperately want to go to that next level. Let's partner more. Let's just form a lot of partnerships, right? Let's gather up everyone we can. Let's start meeting. Let's start talking. And let's have some great meetings. The more meetings we have, the more chance we're going to have of moving ourselves to that next level of understanding and energy. I think it was one of the CEOs in Orangeville that said, you know, we've been working at these meetings, and it was this group of health providers, and Ross Kirkconnell was one of them, and they would meet every month, I think it was, to talk about the state of health, and they'd done this for 20 years, and one of them said, I've always found these meetings very useful, but never of any use. When we work like that as partners, we in a sense have the right idea about the work, but we essentially continue to stay in our silos. And we just maybe sort of move to the top. We kind of build tree houses inside of our silos, and we kind of build little bridges toward the other sectors, and we kind of move across them. But at the end of the day, we all are continuing to do things pretty much the same as we've always done them. And that's to mobilize our communities. Form a collaboration around a common vision. Grain for grain, sun and rain, I'll find my way in nature's change. People know this song? It's kind of interesting because it's kind of the garden song. Inch by inch, row by row. No? Won't you see my garden grow? No, I didn't. There you go. What I think is interesting about this is that you start and you're immersed. And what you're constantly asking is what's possible and who cares. This is something that Margaret Wheatley talks about. And then I think it's really around, when I convene, I'm looking for two things. So those are my first ones, my first big questions, who cares and what's possible. But then I start to ask the question, who can convene? So who can bring people that they know to the table? So my definition of that kind of leader is someone who would invite 10 of their peers and 8 of them would show up. I look for those people. And those people can be both formal leaders and informal leaders. It's really the people who can bring the other right people to the table. Then from there, I'm looking for people who have different elements of the system. And so in Community Conversations, I write a chapter on an exercise that I call my top 100. And I talk about the 100, how to identify the 100 people that if they were to all agree, we know things would change. It's just a technique. It's not definitive. But what we begin to understand is that we begin to look where in the system are the levers for change, and who are the people that have the ability to manipulate those levers.
That what we all need, and that can apply wherever we're doing it, is most of us need a sense of belonging and support in some level of community that gives us a sense of being able to then be strategic in moving on.
This notion of community ownership, this notion of people being engaged with what is going on. I really think that's where the hope lies.
But I think that I really just wanted to say thank you in terms of being really so specific about thinking strategically about the different phases you're in and what styles you're using and what strategies you're using at different points. And to say thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, is this one written by a collaborative? Okay.
Nice to meet you.
I'm here.
Good to see you. Thanks for coming. That's great.
We were just thinking, well, why don't we actually use this?
It's been used by a number of...
Congratulations.
Oh, hi. How are you doing?
Thank you.
Oh, before you come.
Yeah, I figured if I didn't get your tickets,
Oh, it's great. When I work at this work of social innovation, I like that eco-cycle, and I really like the simple, complicated, and complex. But it feels a bit more chaotic than that. I feel like I'm really lost more than I am on a direction. It feels like I'm just sort of flailing through, and I don't really know what the next day is going to bring. And so what I've come to do is I've come to learn to embrace that feeling of lost. And recently I had an experience that really helped me to understand this better. Recently my family and I, we went to Italy together. And we had spent about 3 weeks there, and this time we went from Rome to Sorrento, right, through Naples, right? That's you go through, you got to change trains there. Everybody know this? Anybody done that? How many been to Italy? Oh, look at that. So we had a wonderful time, and we were coming back. And we were sitting in our train car, and my son says to me, "Dad, do we have any water?" And I went, "Oh, no, we don't." The average temperature was about 40 degrees in the summer, so water was pretty important. I said, "I'll just go get some." So I get off the train, and I go to the water machine, and I throw my euro in. Nothing happens. So I pick it up, throw it in again, nothing happens. Pick it up, throw it in again, and kerclunk, the bottle falls down. And I reach down to pick it up, and just as I grab it, I look up, and there goes my train. My kids said I looked like Mr. Bean chasing after it, "Wait for me, wait for me." But of course, trains don't wait for anyone in Italy, and so I was kind of feeling dejected. And I'm sort of walking, feeling somewhat embarrassed because I was really, "Wait for me," And I reached back, I had my wallet, so I thought I would just go buy another ticket and try to find them in Italy. I actually didn't know what hotel we had booked. Marlene did that. So I knew I'd find them at some way, right? So anyway, I'm walking toward the ticket booth, and this porter drives up beside me. And literally no one spoke English, so he was just in Italian telling me to come and sit down. Well, I wasn't going to trust him, because when we got there, everybody know the Naples train station, there's all these porters dressed like porters, but they're not porters. Right? And so they grab your bags and they say, "Oh, we get you next train, we get you next train." They've learned that English, and they start running with your bags. And you chase after them, and when they get there, they hold them ransom for 15 euro. Right? So we had been through that already. So now what I'm thinking is, I'm not going to trust this guy, but eventually he convinced me to get into the cart, and we drive to the admin office. We get there, and he starts talking, and about 12 people come out from their offices, and they're all laughing, I assume at me. And they get another porter, and he starts walking with me, just says, "Come with me," right, like that. And so I'm following him, and we get to these set of stairs. We go down one set of stairs. We go down 2 set of stairs. We go down 3 set of stairs, and all I'm thinking when he asks, I'm going to give him my wallet. Right? Well, we get to the bottom, and there's another train track down there. And I say, hold it, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? And he gives me the ticket that I had in my hand, and he pointed upstairs, and he wrote down when that train would leave and when it would arrive, which was Marlene and the boys. And then he pointed at this track, and when it would leave and when it would arrive. And mine was going to arrive 3 minutes early. They have the fast trains and then the regular trains for those who have been in Europe. So he throws me on this train, and I get on, and I have no ticket. My ticket was invalid. I start walking around the train. There was not a seat to be had anywhere. And I walked literally through the whole train, and luckily enough, at the end of the train, there was a bar. So I got in there, and I started visiting with people, and there were these people from Germany, and I could speak some German, so I spoke some German with them, and had a wonderful time. And then I met Dominic, who was a scholar from the University of Milan in economics. And we spent over 2 hours together talking about economics, and particularly microeconomics in Italy. What a marvelous learning experience it was for me. And when we got to Rome, Dominic says, I know exactly which track they're coming in on. Come with me. We rush off the train. We get there. Of course, I know which car it is because we were there. And we get to the car, and I hold up my bottle of water. And I say, sorry I took so long. So you know, this journey of getting lost is not always as bad as it sounds. And it actually is, in many ways, a really good analogy for social innovation, is to allow ourselves to be lost in something, rather than thinking we can plan our way through, as Francis is talking about. That we enter into something and it has its own life. And in a sense, being present and keeping our mind, being present, forging relationships, being in the moment. These are things that are very much valued in innovation. These are things that are very much valued in community change. So I want to talk a little bit about this community mobilization. There's really three things that I want to talk about in terms of sustaining change in our communities. Creating resilient communities by investing in relationships, which I believe ultimately is that which will sustain any kind of change, and it's actually that which creates the change that we require, is new kinds of relationships. And we've seen this kind of approach not only here in Ontario, but we've been seeing it now across this country, and we've been seeing it right across North America and in many parts of the world, where there is a new form of engagement across all sectors, entering into a new conversation about what is possible, with the major belief that if we bring the people together who care, something's going to change. So these community conversations is why I then wrote that book, is because I began to see that what was really happening is that people were spending long periods of time doing nothing but talking to each other. And there was a marked difference between people talking to each other from the same sector and people talking together in multi-sectors when we were bringing people together. So I wanted to document these conversations. And I wanted to document what I saw was the methodology that people were using to bring about this change in their communities. So there's just this notion of bringing people from the whole community together into a conversation about what is possible. Getting people who care, talking about what is possible. It sounds so simple and straightforward. And really, it is. The sense here, though, is this ability to engage the right system players and to get them to be thinking and talking about the ideas long enough and in such a way that we engage people in the conversation. When people are engaged, they then move to that next level of collaborating. David Crislip, who we had into this area last year, says that the collaborative premise says if you bring the appropriate people together in constructive ways with good information, they will create authentic visions and strategies for addressing shared concerns of the organization and the community. So it's that very understanding that by people talking with each other, people becoming engaged in the issue, people then have this sense that they are together on something. And they start to move together in very deliberate ways. Flowing process of working with people, bringing the right people together, having the right kind of conversations, and doing that in a way that really engages people, that gets them really committed to the issues, that gets them talking to each other across sectors, to start to understand what they can each bring to the work. Research on what I call collective altruism. What causes groups of people to work together selflessly on behalf of others, or not even selflessly, because so often collective altruism, where it comes from, is often from common experience, trying to have others not experience that. But I think it's a very interesting one. I was very interested in that mold example. Was it mold that Francis? Slime. Slime's even better than mold, huh? Because that was a very interesting example about self-organizing systems and sort of how that occurs and what that does, and particularly what then enables action and vision, right? So, I mean, I find it interesting. I mean, the example of the Obama campaign is a very good one. It was a highly controlled campaign, but no one was in control. It was very interesting that sort of everyone was so motivated by the same thing that, you know, millions of people. I mean, I don't think he had when I signed up, it was like 1.1 million people on Facebook on his fans club. You know, it was amazing, right? Just the kind of energy that occurred there. But I think we can see that also at the community level. The difference between leaders and leadership. The difference between there being a common desire for some sort of focus or change versus, you know, that causes a collaborative action across sectors. I think that's what always fascinates me. I'm particularly interested in their three core elements. The first of all around community and our work as professionals in helping people to, first of all, come to recognize their own need for community. So somehow I feel we need to have a conversation about when did we as a society agree that knowing your neighbor was no longer important? Somewhere in the area, the statistic is phenomenal. Over 80% of Canadians don't know the last name of their immediate neighbors, and nearly 60% don't know the first name of all of them, like they might know one or two. When did we agree on this? That it wasn't important anymore.
The advent of the television.
Well, it is one of the factors, said the advent of the television. There are many factors, but I think in many ways we need to re-engage both on a personal level but on a collective level on this notion of why is community important, and we need to have that conversation as an agency. I think the other one is the we. The I and then the we. And the we is, what is it when we get together, what happens? When we get together as organizations, when we get together as volunteers. I've never understood the lost opportunity with volunteers. Many of us, if not all of us, use volunteers, but how often do we bring them together? In terms of bring them together in the context of our mission and give them a sense of community around the work that they're engaging in, which then takes us to the us. And this is what's been so interesting for me. I've interviewed over 1,000 people now, and when they talk about I ask them what their most profound experience of community is, and almost a consensus. It is when we work together with others on behalf of someone else to make the world a better place. When we work together with others to make the world a better place. That's when people most profoundly experience community. So when they're volunteering in your organizations, when they're doing service learning in your schools. And one of the things that we've come to understand is the importance of vision. I'm going to talk about that in a little while, and about establishing a vision and having people broadly understand it, broadly embrace it, but that the vision itself is not necessarily a statement that everybody agrees with. It's more an essence of being. Essentially, less poor, not better poor. Less poverty. Very, very broad. More health. People being healthier. Instead of these sort of statements that allow us to really focus and be focused, we create broad, almost like fields of energy that people can be attracted toward. And in doing that, they begin to find their own way of realizing that vision.